Megan, you are now a co-host. I already made Linda Smith a co-host. Linda, I'm so sorry I didn't get a chance to get Megan your bio. So if you want to do that, that'd be great. I'm going to step away though and get my session started. So you guys are in charge, and I'll be back to check and make sure things are good.
Sounds great. Thanks, you.
Sounds good to me too. Hi, Megan.
Hi, Linda. How are you?
I'm good. Did your first session go well?
It did. Yep.
Yes.
Did go well.
Do you need a bio break?
I don't. Nope. I'm good to go.
Okay. I'd like to test something with you if I could.
Sure.
I want to play a little clip of his voice, and it doesn't have to come through clear, but I want to see if it comes through at all. Okay, I'm going to press this.
Okay.
Do you hear anything?
I do not.
Okay. How about now?
Why? And it blames you if you would say why.
Got it. Yep. I hear that.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm using headphones just to make my voice a little clearer.
Oh,
And
sure.
I'll just pull the jack out when I do that.
Okay.
Okay. And does my voice sound okay to you? It's too
It does.
loud?
Nope. It's perfect.
Okay. All right. Now you've got some things you need to do. Or I need to do for you.
Just, I think at 9:30, I'll kind of say hi to everybody, and then I'll probably just hand it straight over to you and ask you to just say a few words to introduce yourself, let folks know who you are, how you came to be here with us this morning, and then we'll let you get right into your presentation.
Okay, how about the sharing? Can we go ahead and do that now?
Yes, I think you should have the ability to share your screen. Do you see that?
I do see the button.
Okay.
And there's my presentation. And we found it worked best if I used the slideshow, start from the beginning. Oh, well, that's not the beginning. That would be the end. Maybe I pressed present slide. There we go. Down, down, up, up, up. Okay. I think I'm set.
Got it. I see it. I think this is all probably going a little bit more smoothly than it would have this time last year. We're all a little more familiar conducting our lives virtually, aren't we?
We are. I live in the country and 15 minutes from town, and I am glad not to make multiple trips to Winterset. I really have enjoyed my time at home.
Uh-huh.
I may be hard to pry out of here when we're past this.
I know, me too. Makes things easier. It's been fun for this history camp, these events. We have been able to have more folks from out of state.
Yeah.
Who are originally from Iowa and had to move away, or whatever the case is. And so it's been fun to make it more accessible that way.
I have thoroughly enjoyed the Thursday at noon programs.
Mm-hmm.
They're just wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Heard Leo speak and Lance Foster, and looking forward to the ones coming up and the book club. I mean, it just forced us to.
Yeah, it's great. It's a nice way to make things available that folks might have had a hard time attending in the past. Want to say hi to everybody who's getting logged in. Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to get rolling right at about 9:30.
Did I lose you, Megan?
Nope, I'm still here.
Okay, I reconnected. Did you see that?
Your audio did seem to cut out for a second there.
Yeah. I checked my internet speed and it was good this morning. I've had quite a week of that. it was draining, and it finally was Dropbox. I moved a huge set of files there inadvertently, and it was just beating itself up trying to get that up to the internet.
Mhm.
Hey, Megan, if we don't want to record this part of the talk, there's maybe a stop recording feature that you could stop and then reignite when we start. And that's all fine. But if you guys are all good, and it looks like Linda is, I'm going to step away again.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Leah. We can always edit our small talk out of the final recording.
Yeah, I think so. It'd be odd to be, it's hard for me to be quiet, I'll admit it.
I know, same.
You work there at the museum or for the Department of Culture?
I don't know. I come to history camp by way of a connection to Living History Farms. That's how I got my start with all this. And I don't work there anymore. My career has taken me away from history. And so this is a nice chance for me to get my history fix.
Yeah. There's quite an illustrious alumni from Living History Farms.
There
I'm always
sure
running into
are.
someone who worked there or was influenced by someone. Or,
Yeah, and we're all across the country, across the world. You find us everywhere.
Well, nice connections then.
Yeah, absolutely. It is 9:30 by my computer clock, so I think we could go ahead and get rolling. So thanks to everybody for joining us. I am going to hand it straight over to Linda and let her introduce herself and take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming today. My name is Linda Smith, and I was born in Madison County and live here today. And since I've retired, I've made myself busy with history, and there's many, many more years of history to unravel. So I'm enjoying that time. But I'm here today to talk about George Washington Carver. And we all know he died as a renowned scientist. And that's what I was taught in grade school, and that he created more than 300 items using only peanuts. And I really didn't learn much more. The peanut story made me think of peanut butter, which he is not credited with, which made me think of my lunch, which made me think of recess. And then I was pretty much done thinking about George Washington Carver, renowned scientist. But a few years ago, at the annual Madison County Covered Bridge Festival, he was our theme. And the Historical Museum and I decided there was lots of lore about George Washington Carver and his time in Winterset and Iowa. And we decided we better get ahead of that by getting some facts together. So that's the basis of this program today. And as you can see from the front slide there, the white numbers are the years that he was in Iowa from 1888 to 1896. And he was approximately 25 to 33 years old then, just to sort of set the stage. So let's go back just a little. And I am working on moving my screen. Uh-oh, there we go. He was born in Missouri into slavery in the far Southwest without distinction, and his parents were not known to him. He was born on the farm of Moses and Susan Carver, and here you see Moses and one of the Carver homes. And at just a few weeks old, he and his mother were kidnapped, but only the baby was recovered to the Carver household, and he grew up there under their stern but loving care. As a child, he was known as hardworking, inquisitive, already pegged as unusually intelligent, with lots of artistic talents and the ability to nurture plants. And that was just his first 12 years. But he was also prone to chronic respiratory infections, such as whooping cough, that left his voice in a high range for the rest of his life. So I'm going to play you just a little snippet from my PC through Zoom. It won't come through great, but at least you'll hear how high his voice was an adult, and it was yet another thing that he had to overcome. Let's give this a try.
Figure it out for yourself, my lad. You've all that the greatest of men have had. You are, you can, you live, you rise, and it brings to you
So quite unusual. The Carvers were the first of several men and women you'll see throughout this presentation who recognized his genius and nurtured his abilities. They would find him schools, taught him skills both inside and outside of the house that he used for the rest of his life, and they laid quite an imprint on his life. He lived with Andrew and Mariah Watkins in Neosho, where he first left Diamond, where he was born, went 10 miles to Neosho, and started school at age 12. He moved with another couple to Fort Scott, Kansas, and there he witnessed a horrible death of one of his race, so he left there and continued his travels in search of an education. He could make money as a day worker, but he usually found work inside due to his very fine domestic skills. He could knit and crochet and tat. He could always earn a little money since it didn't cost much to acquire a wash tub, a washboard, and a bar soap, and clothes always needed to be clean. In Minneapolis, Kansas, Lucy and Christopher Seymour helped him finish high school, which was the equivalent to our 10th grade. Then his struggle almost seemed to be over. He had been accepted to Highland College in Northeast Kansas. So going there with his signed application form, and he was likely elated to finally be in an atmosphere he had worked so hard to gain, but his hopes were dashed. They did not accept his race in Highland. And you've got to think, didn't they ask if he was white? Well, they must not have. They may have, or asked that he was black. What they may have asked was he white? Which he, of course, said he was not. For Highland was a missionary school for Indians, and the administration feared that if they let a black student in, that their contributors would object and their donations would decline. So Carver was turned away and probably thought right then his educational aspirations were dashed. But he continued his wandering. He went out to far western Kansas where they were starting to homestead and lived in his own sod house for a couple years. By then he was 6 feet tall, but still had that high voice. He was ever interested in the plants around him, and his soddy was said to have the best garden and flowers of anyone's. And he also wandered to western Kansas where he saw cactus plants that were unlike anything else he had seen. But after 18 months there, he mortgaged land for $300 and began his journey again. He went home first, and though we don't know the reason, his travels took him to Winterset, Iowa. This is a map that is at the National Carver landmark in Diamond, Missouri. The blue circle shows you where Diamond is in the far southwest corner. And it just depicts how transient he was during that second 12 years when he was roaming Kansas, and then eventually came to Winterset in Iowa. And then we'll see he goes to Indianola and Ames and then to Tuskegee. Sometime in 1888, at that age of 25 or 26, he's not quite sure when he was born. He just knows that it was the end of the Civil War. He landed in Winterset, which was the growing county seat of Madison County. The square looked like this at the time. It was filled with brick and limestone buildings and faced the limestone courthouse that you see there. That's all still in place today. He found a job as the head cook in the Schultz Hotel just a block from the courthouse. And they had just added the brick addition you see there with a large dining room. As was his custom, he found a local church to attend. He didn't much care about the denomination, although he said he was a Presbyterian. In Winterset, another block from the hotel, was the First Baptist Church. Perhaps it was the music he heard there on his first Sunday morning that drew him just to that church. I'll let Carver describe what happened next, as he recalled in 1922. One evening, I went to a white church and sat in the rear of the house. The next day, a handsome man called for me at the hotel and said his wife wanted to see me. When I reached the splendid residence, I was astonished to recognize her as the prima donna in the choir. I was most astonished when she told me that my fine voice had attracted her. I had to sing quite a number of pieces for her and agree to come to her house at least once a week. And from that time until now, Mr. and Mrs. Milholland have been my warmest and most helpful friends. So the fine residence he mentioned still exists in Winterset, not far from the hotel. He didn't roam too far from that side of town. And there's a photo of the Milhollands. It was Dr. James and Helen Milholland's family, and they were educated, cultured, and caring. They invited Carver to their home on a daily basis. He even played Santa for the girls at Christmas time, who were a little younger than they were in this picture. They were probably on both sides of 10 when he was there. Helen's interest paralleled Carver's. She gave him singing lessons and he gave her painting lessons. And they both tended to her greenhouse, which he was glad to have access to, and the plantings in the yard. So they were a good match. His job as a cook at the Schultz Hotel ended when the son came back from a try at a musical career. And so they let George go and instilled their son as the head cook. So Carver spent the rest of his time in Winterset at his shanty near the cemetery at the very edge of town, doing laundry, and was able to save up some money. Carver later wrote to Helen Milholland in 1928 and said, "You know of my early struggles, as but few people do, and in other ways you know me probably as no one else does. One of those struggles was overcoming his devastation at being turned away from Highland College in Kansas. And the Mulholland's to that was, as Carver said, to insist upon me going to art school, and they chose Simpson College for me." So his next move from 1890 to 1892 was Simpson College. He enrolled there with $75 he had saved, and it took all but 10 cents to set him up as a student. Simpson College at that time consisted of 3 schools. They had a business school, an art school, and a music school. And they had 426 students and 17 faculty. The president of the college gave him an abandoned shed at the edge of campus where he did laundry to make ends meet. But the students and faculty were both kind to him. They supplied him with furniture, would slip coins under his door or tickets to some event, and included him in all kinds of athletic and literary activities. Carver later wrote, "I shudder to think what might have happened if Simpson College had closed its doors. When I came, hungering and thirsting for an opportunity to develop as God gave me light and strength, they made me believe I was a real human being." That's quite a statement. Carver enrolled in the art program. There you see him seated in the middle of the picture. There were 20 students in the program, and all except George were young women. His art teacher was Etta Budd. When she saw he was struggling to make ends meet, she enlisted a kind Indianola couple, the Listons, who own the local bookstore, to assist. Mrs. Liston is going to play a part in his life here. We don't know their exact names, or biographies don't have their names listed, even her first name. So I just chose a hat to represent her because I think she was a probably formidable Victorian lady. She also was an artist, and they had a very close bond, as evidenced by, as he wrote her throughout his life, he always addressed Mrs. Liston as mother. Etta Budd was seeing more than a talented art student. Carver wrote back to Mrs. Milholland in Winterset that, "My teacher told me the other day that she was sorry she did not find me out sooner, or she could have planned differently for me." So I think they're talking about his skills there. But whatever regret Etta Budd had, she had a plan in mind. When Carver completed his 2-year art program, she introduced him to her father, Professor Joseph Budd, who was then a professor of horticulture at Iowa Agricultural College and had been for 20 years. So great connection. Though unhappy to leave the world of art, which was truly his passion, Carver began to realize that he could be of greater service to his people with an agricultural background. His plan was to uplift others as he had been and to make their education an easier road. So he got to Iowa Agricultural College for his last 4 years in Iowa, 1892 to 1896. And this map was in the Iowa State Archives and is marked 1896 in a couple of places. For any of you familiar with the Iowa State campus, this does have north at the top, and in the blue circle, building number 2, is Morrill Hall that still stands today, so you can get a perspective. And I'm going to call it Iowa State from now on because that rolls off my tongue much easier. It was a well-known land-grant college and had an esteemed faculty of researchers, although the student body wasn't much bigger than Simpson's. The school motto is science with practice, and that sums up the school's work as a land-grant college to train students in practical skills who then train others beyond the campus. But things did not start off well here. While Simpson students seem to have accepted Carver from the start, the Iowa students did not. He was welcome to serve in the dining room, but he was told to eat in the basement with the field hands. School officials thought it best not to put him in the all-white dormitory, but didn't know what to do with him instead. Professor James Wilson, a very authoritative-looking man, solved the problem. Carver later said that Professor Wilson, as soon as he heard it, said, "Send him to me. I have a room." And he gave me his office and was very happy in doing so. So with a rough start, Carver wrote to Mrs. Liston that he was discouraged, wondering if his transfer to Ames had been a mistake and if he should drop out. So Mrs. Liston consulted Etta Budd, and Etta told her, "Stand by him. My father is going to keep him where he is." And the formidable Mrs. Liston took the train to Ames and spent a day making herself noticed as she and Carver walked campus. She went with him to the library and his class halls and the laboratory and the auditorium. And at mealtime, she joined him in the basement with the field hands. Well, they didn't like that at all. And the students' attitudes were quickly changed. George later said, "The next day, everything was different. The ice was broken, and from that time on, things went much easier." George Carver was kind and thoughtful and a patient tutor for all the students that knew less than he did, which was about everybody. And the students came to appreciate these qualities and willingly participated in campus activities where Carver was involved. Here you see him in the dairy class. He's in the back row towards the right. He also served in the required freshman and sophomore military training. And he is fourth from the left in the front row in this picture. And in the back, you can see Old Main and Morrill Hall again. He was a joiner. He joined all 7 literary societies. He was in the German Club, the Art Club, was the founder of the Agricultural Club. And one biographer said he used his artistic abilities to decorate for the student celebrations, which made him very popular. And then he could play just about any musical instrument at the actual event. So he was a man of very broad skills. Here you see him again in the back row towards the left. Not sure which society this was. He found time for art class, again his passion, and 4 of his paintings were picked by judges to be exhibited in the 1893 Chicago Columbian Exposition or World's Fair. One of the pieces was a cactus that he had seen when he lived in western Kansas, and Carver had no thought of going. His threadbare work clothes wouldn't do. But to encourage Carver to attend, fellow students bundled him off to a downtown Ames store and purchased him a brown suit. and one biographer claims that he wore it exclusively the rest of his life. Unlike the students, the professors at Iowa State seemed to easily recognize Carver's abilities, fostered his curiosity and genius, and gave him important work to do, and also formed very personal bonds. Carver, in return, never forgot their kindness. So here's some of the ones that had the biggest influence on him. Let's start with Professor Tama Jim Wilson, whose picture you saw earlier. He had already served in the Iowa legislature and the U.S. House of Representatives when he was named Professor of Agriculture at Iowa State in 1891. He was also the Experiment Station Director, which they still have, and the first Dean of Ag. He later served as Secretary of Agriculture under Presidents Roosevelt and Taft. Etta Budd's father in the upper left, Professor Joseph Budd, introduced profitable orchards to Iowa farmers and wrote a much needed horticulture text. Budd put Carver in charge of the greenhouses and considered him his assistant almost from the beginning of Carver's time at Iowa State. It was Carver's responsibility to keep up all the flower beds on campus, so he was in fact the college's landscaper. I wonder what pieces he put in place that we still enjoy today. Professor Lewis Pamel was head of the botany department, and he was quickly becoming a national authority on weeds and poisonous plants, and Pamel State Park in Madison County is named after him. Carver and Pamel co-authored academic papers even while Carver was still an undergraduate. And many years later, Carver wrote to Pamel, "I am confident that my life and career could never have been what it had if it had not touched yours." And then the last one on the page is Henry C. Wallace. He was near Carver's age and introduced Carver to his family. Henry C's son, Henry A., was just a little boy then and went on field trips in the wood with Carver. And the younger Henry later said that Carver introduced him to the mysteries of botany and plant fertilization. He deepened my appreciation of plants in a way I could never forget. And both Henry A., pictured, and Henry C., his son, later served as U.S. Secretaries of Agriculture and remained colleagues of Carver's and were very helpful to him in his adult career. So another nice photo of Iowa State. Before receiving his bachelor's degree in 1894 as Iowa State's first Black graduate, he was eagerly granted a teaching assistantship and admitted to the master's degree program. George didn't need to look for a post after earning his master's degree in 1896 either. Iowa State expected him to remain there as a full-fledged experiment station botanist with a comfortable salary. But his published papers and lectures around the country had made his name known, and colleges began recruiting him, much to the dismay of the professors previously mentioned. They wrote him recommendation letters, and they all have a very mournful tone. For instance, Wilson said in his letter of recommendation, "I do not want to lose Mr. Carver from our station staff here. I have been more intimate with him than any other student on campus." And they all told in their recommendation letter that whatever school it was, they better take care of him or they'd be back. And Carver seriously considered Alcorn College in Mississippi because he was looking for a Black campus. His goal was, as he explained, "It has always been the one great ideal of my life to be of the greatest good to the greatest number of my people possible. And to this end, I have been preparing myself for these many years, feeling as I do that this line of education is the key to unlock the golden door of freedom to my people." And he knew that could be done better elsewhere. So while Alcorn was courting him, and he was pretty serious about going there, he met Booker T. Washington. There is his graduation picture from his undergraduate year. He met Booker T. Washington when Booker came to Cedar Rapids to speak. They had been conversing through mail, and Carver went to see him personally along with Professors Wilson and Wallace, and they were all swayed by Washington's charismatic ways. He's well known for that and his many promises. So George Washington Carver took his leave from Iowa State. He was given a microscope by the students and faculty, which still exists. There was a crowd to send him off at the railroad station. Then Carver, in the suit that the students had purchased for his trip to Chicago, and well nurtured by his various relationships at Iowa State, began the trip towards Tuskegee and the rest of his life. So Iowa was definitely a turning point in Carver's life. He came here discouraged in his mid-20s with a 10th grade education and little prospect of more. But he left 8 years later with his master's degree from a prestigious college with the ability to fulfill the one great ideal of his life, influenced by many Iowans. That's the end of my presentation. I'd be glad to answer any questions. It looks like there's a couple questions here, Megan. I don't know if you're going to read those or I am, but I will. The first one is, have you looked at William Arthur Liston and Sophia Emma St. John Liston? I did do a little genealogy work on those, found William Arthur, also found a Dr. James. I didn't find anyone who owned a bookstore. As I said, there's several Listons in Indianola. I bet that could be figured out if someone looked at it a little more closely. And did I find any friends of Dr. Carver who were people of color in Iowa? Was the next question. I did not, although I know in Winterset there was a freedom seeker, a runaway slave who lived here at that time and owned a stable, and our dray man, the person who moved packages back and forth and luggage back and forth from the train depot, was John Jones. And the other man's name was Charlie Moore. So I wonder if they were not acquainted. Someone here is mentioning that there's a project called Stories in Living Color, and that must cover the lives of people such as George Washington Carver. That's interesting. I'll have to check into that. Okay, I'm looking at the chat now. There is a monument to Winterset. How do you find it? What I'm showing you on the screen is the mural that is in the pocket park that's called Carver Park in Winterset. And it is 1 block east of the courthouse on Court Avenue. And back when I showed the picture of the hotel, you could see the side of the brick building, that there was a yard there, just a little sliver. And that is where that park is. The hotel no longer exists. It's our fire station now, but there is a pocket park there where there are many plants and benches and this beautiful mural and a big text about Carver. I see he was a favorite of someone who read about him in my childcraft books. Well, you followed him much closer than I did. Good for you, because it's quite an interesting story. Well, that looks like the end of the questions and answers in chat. So I'll just thank you all for attending. I hope you learned a little bit more, and he sort of inspires us as well as the people who inspired him to go out and do good for others. So I hope that's one of your takeaways for today, and thank you for your time.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Linda. And thank you to everyone for joining. This room, I think, will be open for another few minutes. And so feel free to hang out, enjoy the mural that's on the screen. And otherwise, we'll see everybody at our next session, which is starting at 10:20. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Megan.